The chandelier's glow bathed the Manhattan ballroom in gold, but Lena Carter's emerald gown burned brighter, a beacon of defiance amid the clinking glasses and hollow laughter of New York's elite. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her jaw tight, her fingers clutching a champagne flute as her husband, Ethan Caldwell, billionaire tech mogul, took center stage. His tailored suit hugged his frame, his smile a polished blade. The room hushed as he raised his glass, the spotlight carving his face into sharp angles. "A wish for my 45th, he said, voice smooth as venom, his eyes locked on Lena, cold and unyielding. "I wish my wife would vanish from my life." Gasps erupted. Lena's pulse hammered, her knuckles whitening around the glass. Ethan's lips curled, his gaze slicing through her. "Lena's a nobody, a journalist scraping by on sob stories. She doesn't belong here." He gestured to Olivia, his young assistant, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights, her smirk a silent taunt. "Olivia's my future. Young, ambitious, part of my world." The crowd shifted, whispers buzzing like wasps. Lena's chest constricted, her breath shallow, but her eyes didn't waver. She wouldn't crumble. Not here. Not now. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You're a burden, Lena. Always have been." He waved a hand, dismissing her decade of sacrifice. Nights spent editing his speeches, skipping her deadlines to prop up his empire. "Go back to your little articles. Leave the real world to us." A guest coughed awkwardly. Another looked away. Lena's teeth ground together, the pain anchoring her. She wanted to scream, to hurl the champagne in his face, but she held still, her silence a weapon. The room spun, faces blurring into a sea of judgment, but her resolve hardened like steel. Olivia sauntered forward, her heels clicking, her voice dripping with mock pity. "Oh, Lena, don't take it personally. You're just not enough." Lena's fingers twitched, the urge to slap that smirk away surging through her. But she didn't. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, she set the glass down, the clink echoing like a gunshot. "You'll regret this, Ethan," she said, her voice low, cutting through the murmurs. Her words weren't a plea. They were a promise, sharp as a blade drawn across silk. Ethan laughed, a cruel bark that echoed off the walls. "Regret? You're nothing without me." He turned to the crowd, raising his glass again. "To new beginnings." The toast was met with hesitant claps, but Lena was already moving. Her gown swished as she strode toward the exit, her shoulders squared, her heart pounding with a fury she hadn't felt in years. The ballroom doors loomed ahead, her escape from this gilded cage. She didn't look back, but she felt Ethan's stare, a weight she'd carry until she could crush it. Outside, the Manhattan night swallowed her, the city's pulse matching her own. Her heels clicked on the pavement, each step a declaration of war. Ethan's words burned in her mind. Vanish. Nobody. Burden. But they didn't break her. They lit a fire. Somewhere in the shadows of his empire, a truth was hiding, and Lena Carter, the journalist he mocked, would tear it free. As she disappeared into the neon-lit streets, a single thought pulsed through her. Ethan Caldwell would fall, and she'd be the one to push him. Lena Carter's heels struck the marble floor, each step a hammer blow echoing through the stunned silence of the Manhattan ballroom. Ethan's words, "Vanish. Nobody," sliced into her, but her spine stayed rigid, her emerald gown a defiant flame against the sea of muted tuxedos and whispering gowns. Her pulse roared, a storm trapped in her chest, but her face was stone. She wouldn't let them see her break. Not Ethan, not Olivia, not the gawking elite who'd feasted on her humiliation. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a fury so raw it felt like her bones might crack. "You're nothing," Ethan's voice chased her, a final jab as she neared the towering double doors. Lena stopped, her hand on the brass handle, the cold metal grounding her. She turned, her eyes locking on to his, sharp enough to cut glass. "Nothing?" she said, her voice low, a blade wrapped in velvet. "You built your empire on my sacrifices, Ethan. You'll choke on that mistake." The words landed like a slap, silencing the murmurs. Ethan's smirk faltered, his eyes flickering with something, doubt maybe, but he masked it with a scoff. Olivia giggled, clinging to his arm, but Lena's gaze didn't waver. She was done playing the dutiful wife. The crowd parted as she moved, their whispers a buzzing swarm she ignored. Her jaw clenched, her breath steadying with each step. She'd spent a decade dimming her light for him, nights drafting his pitches, skipping her own scoops to polish his image. No more. The doors swung open, and the Manhattan night hit her like a slap, the city's pulse sinking with her own. Her gown caught the neon glow, a signal of war. She didn't cry. Instead, her lips pressed into a thin line, her resolve hardening like iron forged in fire. Lena stepped onto the sidewalk, the ballroom's clamor fading behind her. Her hands balled into fists, nails biting into her palms. Ethan thought he could erase her, but he'd just unleashed her. She'd been a journalist before she was his wife, a hunter of truths, and she'd bury him with one. As she vanished into the city's shadows, her heart pounded with a vow. Ethan Caldwell would learn what nothing could do. The night air crackled with her defiance, a promise that this was only the beginning. Ethan Caldwell leaned back in his penthouse office chair, the Manhattan skyline sprawling beyond the glass walls. A kingdom he'd built on ambition and lies. The buzz of his birthday bash lingered in his ears, but Lena's parting words, "You'll choke on that mistake," clawed at him, a splinter under his skin. His fingers drummed the mahogany desk, his smirk gone, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his mouth. He'd humiliated her, sure, but the fire in her eyes hadn't flickered. It burned, and that burned him. His phone pinged, a sharp sound cutting through the silence. An email, no sender name, just a blank address with a subject, "The past never stays buried." Ethan's jaw tightened, his pulse quickening. He opened it, his eyes scanning a grainy scan of a financial ledger from 2010, tied to the Unity Fund, a charity he'd once chaired for the Black community. A single line was highlighted, $2 unaccounted for. Below it, a cryptic note, "James Holt knew. Do you?" Ethan's breath hitched. James Holt. His old partner died in a car crash years ago, a name he'd buried deep. His fingers hovered over the delete button, but his gut churned. Who sent this? Lena? No, she wouldn't dare. Would she? He stood, pacing, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood. The ledger wasn't proof, not yet, but it was a crack in his armor. He'd siphoned funds, sure, but it was clean, covered up. Or so he thought. James had questioned him once, his voice sharp, accusing, before that crash silenced him. Ethan's hands clenched, knuckles whitening. He dismissed Lena as a nobody, but her words echoed now, a warning he couldn't shake. What did she know? His eyes darted to the phone, the email glaring like an open wound. Olivia's laughter broke his spiral, her heels clicking as she entered, her blonde hair catching the city lights. Still brooding, Ethan, she teased, tossing her purse onto the desk. Lena's gone. You won. Her voice was syrupy, but it grated on him now. He snapped, This isn't a game. She raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Then why do you look scared? Ethan's glare could have cut steel, but she just smirked, oblivious to the storm brewing in his chest. He turned away, his mind racing. The email wasn't random. Someone was digging, and Lena's defiance at the party felt like the first move in a chess game he hadn't seen coming. He sank back into his chair, the ledger's numbers burning into his brain. James Holt's name was a ghost, and now it haunted him. Ethan's fingers twitched, itching to call his fixer, to bury this again. But Lena's face flashed in his mind, her steady gaze, her vow. He'd underestimated her, and that mistake was starting to sting. As Olivia prattled on about the next gala, Ethan stared out at the city, its lights winking like eyes watching him. Somewhere out there, Lena was moving, and whatever she'd find next would hit harder than her words. Find her. Now! Ethan Caldwell's voice snapped like a whip, his eyes blazing as he jabbed a finger at his assistant, Mark, in the sleek, sterile confines of his Manhattan penthouse office. The email about James Holt and the missing $2 million gnawed at him, a wasp in his skull. Lena's parting shot, You'll choke on that mistake. looped in his mind, her steady gaze a ghost he couldn't shake. His fingers gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles pale, his pulse hammering with a mix of fury and unease. He'd crushed her at the party, hadn't he? So why did his chest feel like it was caving in? Mark nodded, sweat beading on his brow, and scurried out, phone already pressed to his ear. Ethan paced, his polished shoes clicking like a metronome on the hardwood. Lena wasn't at their Upper East Side apartment. He'd checked. Her clothes, her laptop, gone. She'd vanished just as he'd wished, but not on his terms. That stung. He'd built an empire on control, yet her defiance, her calm exit, had cracked something in him. He needed her found, not to apologize, but to silence whatever she might know. That email wasn't a coincidence. Lena was a journalist, a bloodhound for secrets. Had she sniffed out his past? He grabbed his phone, scrolling through contacts, mutual friends, her old editor, anyone who might know where she'd gone. She's hiding, he muttered, dialing a college friend, Claire. Ethan, you humiliated her. Claire spat, her voice sharp. She's done with you. She hung up before he could argue. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding. He tried another number, Lena's cousin in Harlem. Don't call here again, the cousin snapped, cutting him off. Each rejection fueled his anger, but beneath it, a cold dread coiled tighter. Lena wasn't just running, she was plotting. He stormed to his car, a black Bentley waiting in the underground garage. Brooklyn, he barked at the driver, recalling a dive bar Lena used to haunt for her stories. The city blurred past, neon lights streaking like accusations. At the bar, a grizzled bartender shook his head. Haven't seen Lena in months. You messed up, man. Ethan's fist slammed the counter, the sting in his knuckles sharp. Where is she? He growled. The bartender shrugged, unfazed. Ethan's control was slipping, and he hated it. Lena's absence was a void, her silence louder than any scream. His phone buzzed. Mark. She's at Marcus Reed's place in Brooklyn, 1423 Flatbush Avenue. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his fingers tightening around the phone. Marcus, her old colleague, the one who'd always pushed her to chase bigger stories. Of course, she'd run to him. Ethan's mind raced, replaying that ledger, James Holt's name. Had Lena told Marcus? Were they digging together? His throat tightened, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. He barked at the driver to head to Flatbush, his hands balled into fists, nails biting into his palms. At Marcus's rundown apartment building, Ethan pounded on the door. No answer. He peered through a window, seeing only shadows. Lena wasn't there, but a neighbor's glance told him she'd been around. She left this morning, the old woman said, eyeing him warily. Ethan's pulse spiked. She was close, slipping through his fingers. He drove to her favorite coffee shop, a hole-in-the-wall joint she'd mentioned in passing. Empty. His frustration boiled over, his fist slamming the steering wheel. Damn it, Lena, he hissed, his voice a raw edge of panic and rage. Every dead end stoked his unease. Lena wasn't broken. She was hunting. The email, the ledger, James Holt's ghost. They were her moves, not his. He'd wanted her gone, but now she was a shadow he couldn't catch, a threat he couldn't control. As he sped back to Manhattan, the city's lights glared like a jury, and Ethan felt the first real stab of regret. Lena was out there, and whatever she was chasing would hit like a freight train. Keep digging, Lena. You're better than his lies. Marcus Reed's voice cut through the dim glow of his cluttered Brooklyn apartment, his words a lifeline as Lena Carter hunched over her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. Her emerald gown was gone, replaced by a worn hoodie, her hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes blazing with a fire Ethan's cruelty had ignited. The sting of his words, vanish, nobody, still burned, but she channeled it into every click, every search. Her jaw clenched, her pulse steady. She wasn't the broken wife he'd mocked. She was a journalist, a hunter, and she'd tear his empire apart. Papers littered the coffee table, notes on Ethan's Unity Fund, snippets about James Holt's accident. Marcus, graying but sharp, leaned over her shoulder, his voice low. You're onto something, kid. That fund was dirty. Lena nodded, her lips pressed tight, her fingers pausing only to sip cold coffee. She'd spent years dimming her instincts to prop up Ethan's image. But no more. Her screen glowed with an old article about the fund's community work, a lie she'd helped polish. Now she'd rip it open. Her nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her as she cross-referenced dates, names, anything to crack Ethan's facade. A knock at the door made her flinch. Marcus waved it off, answering to find a young woman, Aisha, clutching a folder. "Miss Carter, I need your help," Aisha said, her voice trembling. "My community center's losing funding. Same story as 10 years ago." Lena's eyes flicked up, sharp. The center was tied to Ethan's fund. She took the folder, her heart racing as she scanned it. Budget cuts, vague explanations, Ethan's signature buried in the fine print. "He's still bleeding them dry," she muttered, her voice ablade. Aisha's eyes widened, hopeful. Lena stood, her resolve ironclad. "I'll find the truth, Aisha. For you. For all of them." She returned to her laptop, her fingers a blur, chasing leads on the fund. Marcus handed her a USB drive. "Old backups from my investigative days. Might help." Lena plugged it in, her breath hitching as files loaded. Emails, memos. A cryptic note from James Holt. "Ethan's hiding millions. Check the offshore accounts." Her pulse spiked, her teeth grinding. James had known something, and it got him killed. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. Aisha's desperation, the community's loss, fueled her. Ethan's betrayal had shattered her, but this was bigger. His lies had hurt people she'd sworn to protect. Lena leaned back, her hoodie slipping off one shoulder, her eyes locked on the screen. She wasn't hiding. She was rebuilding, piece by piece, in this cramped apartment that smelled of coffee and ink. Marcus clapped her shoulder. "You're not just a journalist, Lena. You're a damn warrior." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. She'd been invisible to Ethan, but here she was unstoppable. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to dig deeper. Somewhere in those files was a truth that would gut him. As Aisha thanked her and left, Lena's gaze hardened. The city's hum beyond the window, a call to battle. Ethan thought he'd erased her, but she was carving her path, and it led straight to his destruction. "I'm sorry, Lena. I was wrong." Ethan Caldwell's voice cracked, a rare fracture in his polished armor, as he stood in the doorway of a gritty Brooklyn coffee shop, his tailored coat out of place among the chipped mugs and worn tables. Lena Carter froze, her fingers tightening around her laptop, her hoodie slipping off one shoulder. Her eyes, sharp as flint, met his, unyielding. The hum of the shop, baristas grinding beans, customers murmuring, faded as her pulse roared. Ethan's apology a spark in a powder keg. She'd been digging into his unity fund, unearthing James Holt's ghost, and now here he was, groveling. But she wasn't buying it. "You think sorry fixes this?" Lena's voice cut like a switchblade, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She slammed her laptop shut, the sound a gunshot in the tense air. Ethan flinched, his hands raised, palms out, like a man facing a firing squad. "I panicked," he said, stepping closer, his eyes darting, searching for a crack in her resolve. "I shouldn't have said those things. Come home, Lena. We can fix this." His words were smooth, rehearsed, but his twitching fingers betrayed him. Lena's lips curled, a bitter half-smile. He wasn't here for her. He was here for control. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, her gaze pinning him. "You humiliated me, Ethan. Called me nothing. You don't get to walk that back." Her voice was low, each word a deliberate strike. Ethan opened his mouth, but she cut him off, her hand slashing the air. "No, you don't talk. You listen." The shop's chatter stilled, eyes flicking their way. Ethan's face flushed, his power shrinking under her stare. "You want me back? Prove it. Open the Unity Fund's books. Every transaction. Every dollar." Her demand was a gauntlet, thrown with precision. Ethan's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face before he masked it with a forced nod. "Fine," he said, his voice tight, like a man swallowing glass. "I'll get you the records." Lena's eyes narrowed, catching the lie in his hesitation. She stood, her chair scraping the floor, her hoodie falling back to reveal the steel in her posture. "Don't play me, Ethan. I'm not your prop anymore." She grabbed her bag, her movements sharp. deliberate. As she brushed past him, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it. A text from an unknown number. Holt's crash. Look at the police report. 2010. Her breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the phone. Ethan didn't notice. His eyes fixed on her, pleading, but she saw through him. He wasn't here to fix things. He was here to bury them. Lena stepped closer, her voice a hiss. I'll find the truth, Ethan, with or without you. She turned, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, and walked out, leaving him in the doorway, his apology crumbling like ash. Her heart pounded, not with pain, but with purpose. The text was a lead, a thread to pull, and she'd unravel it until Ethan's world collapsed. Marcus was waiting at his apartment, ready to dive into the police report. As she strode into the Brooklyn night, the city's pulse matched her own, a drumbeat of reckoning. Ethan's empire was built on lies, and Lena was coming for every single one. Stop digging, Lena, or you'll regret it. Olivia's voice hissed through the phone, sharp as a razor, her words dripping with venom as Lena Carter stood frozen in Marcus Reed's cluttered Brooklyn apartment. The call came from a blocked number, but Olivia's smug tone was unmistakable, the same one that had mocked Lena at Ethan's birthday bash. Lena's fingers tightened around her phone, her knuckles whitening, her pulse hammering like a war drum. The text about James Holt's 2010 police report still burned in her mind, and now Olivia was stepping out of the shadows, no longer just Ethan's mistress, but a predator bearing her teeth. You don't scare me, Lena snapped, her voice a steel blade, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ground together. Olivia laughed, a cold cutting sound. You're a nobody, Lena. Keep poking around, and you'll end up like James Holt. The line went dead, leaving Lena's heart pounding, her breath sharp and shallow. She slammed the phone onto the table, the clatter echoing her fury. Marcus, hunched over a stack of files, looked up, his eyes narrowing. Who was that? He asked, his voice low, urgent. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line. Olivia. She knows we're on to the fund. Lena paced, her sneakers scuffing the worn floor, her hoodie slipping as her mind raced. Olivia wasn't just Ethan's side piece. She was in deep, guarding his secrets like a dragon hoarding gold. Lena's fingers twitched, itching to tear through more files, to find the thread that would unravel them both. She'd already linked Ethan's Unity Fund to missing millions, and the text about Holt's crash pointed to something darker. Olivia's threat wasn't a bluff. It was a warning shot, and Lena felt the crosshairs on her back. Her nails dug into her palms, the sting fueling her resolve. Marcus stood, his graying hair catching the lamplight, his voice steady but fierce. She's scared, Lena. That means you're close. He slid a folder across the table labeled Holt 2010. Lena's breath hitched as she opened it, her eyes scanning a grainy police report. James Holt, Ethan's former partner, died in a car crash ruled accidental, but a handwritten note in the margin screamed otherwise. Brake lines tampered? Her pulse spiked, her teeth biting her lip until it stung. Olivia's call wasn't random. She was protecting Ethan's empire, and maybe her own. Lena's gaze hardened, her fingers flipping through the folder with surgical precision. Olivia's threat only sharpened her focus. She thinks she can stop me, Lena muttered, her voice a low growl. She's wrong. Marcus nodded, his hand clapping her shoulder. We'll bury them, Lena. Together. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with a fire that burned hotter with every lead. Olivia wasn't just a mistress. She was a player in Ethan's game, and Lena was done being a pawn. She grabbed her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys, pulling up old articles about the Unity Fund. Olivia's name popped up, a low-level assistant in 2010, but tied to Ethan's inner circle. Lena's eyes narrowed, her heart racing. Olivia knew about the crash. Maybe she'd helped cover it up. The apartment's air grew heavy, the weight of the truth pressing down. Lena stood, her posture rigid, her resolve a blade honed to kill. Olivia's threat was a spark, but Lena was the inferno. As she stared at the screen, the city's pulse outside thrummed with her own, a call to war. Ethan and Olivia thought they could silence her, but she'd make them scream. You're chasing a ghost, Lena, but ghosts bite. Marcus Reed's warning sliced through the stale air of the New York Public Library's archive room, his voice low, urgent, as Lena Carter hunched over a microfilm reader, her eyes burning from hours of staring at grainy documents. Olivia's threat, "You'll end up like James Holt," rang in her ears, a taunt that fueled her. Her fingers gripped the reader's knob, turning it with a ferocity that matched the fire in her chest. Her hoodie clung to her sweat-dampened back, her jaw clenched tight enough to make her teeth ache. She wasn't just digging for Ethan's secrets anymore. She was clawing through his lies to unearth a truth that could bury him and Olivia both. The screen flickered, spitting out a 2010 police report on James Holt's crash. Lena's pulse hammered, her breath shallow as she zoomed in. Brake lines tampered? The handwritten note she'd found at Marcus's apartment was no fluke. She cross-referenced it with a coroner's file. Blunt trauma, no skid marks, no witnesses. Her fingers flew to her notebook, scribbling dates, names, anything to pin Ethan to the scene. "He didn't just steal," she muttered, her voice a low growl. "He killed!" Marcus, leaning over her shoulder, nodded, his eyes sharp. "Keep going. Find the money trail." Lena's lips pressed into a thin line, her resolve a steel blade honed by betrayal. She switched reels, pulling up financial records from Ethan's Unity Fund. Her eyes scanned columns of numbers, her pen circling discrepancies, $2 million siphoned to an offshore account labeled Cayman Trust. Her heart raced, her nails digging into her palms. The fund was meant to uplift Black communities, a cause she'd championed for Ethan, but he'd twisted it into a piggy bank. She found a memo, buried deep, signed by James Holt, questioning the transfers. "He knew," Lena hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "James was on to him, and Ethan shut him up." Marcus handed her a USB drive. "Check this. Old emails from my source at the fund." Lena plugged it in, her fingers shaking as she opened a file. An email from James to Ethan popped up, dated weeks before the crash. "Stop the transfers or I go public." Lena's breath hitched, her knuckles whitening. Another email from Ethan to an unknown recipient. "Handle Holt. Make it clean." Her stomach churned, bile rising. She leaned back, her chair creaking, her mind racing. Ethan wasn't just a thief. He was a murderer, and Olivia's threat meant she was in on it. Lena's eyes flicked to Marcus. "We need more," she said, her voice a blade. He nodded, pulling out his phone. "I've got a contact at the precinct. Might have the original crash photos." Lena dove back into the microfilm, her fingers a blur, chasing every lead. She found a news clipping about the fund's launch. Ethan smiling beside Olivia, then a junior assistant. Her role was small, but her name was on a transfer approval. Lena's pulse spiked. "Olivia was in the room," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "She helped cover it up." Marcus's contact texted back, a grainy photo of Holt's wrecked car, brake lines visibly severed. Lena's hands trembled, not from fear, but from a fury so raw it felt like her bones might snap. She printed the photo. The machines were a battle cry. Hours bled into dusk, her eyes stinging, her coffee cold. She cross-checked bank records, finding a payment to a consultant the day after Holt's death. No name, just a shell company linked to Olivia's email. Lena's teeth ground together, her heart pounding like a sledgehammer. She wasn't just building a case, she was forging a weapon. Marcus clapped her shoulder, his voice firm. "You're close, Lena. This is bigger than Ethan." She nodded, her gaze locked on the screen, where a final document loaded, a wire transfer receipt, signed by Ethan, dated the day of the crash. Her breath caught, her fingers freezing. This was it, the truth that would gut him. She stood, her hoodie slipping, her posture rigid with purpose. The library's silence was a cocoon, but Lena was ready to break free. Olivia's threat had only sharpened her edge, and Ethan's lies were crumbling under her hands. She stuffed the printouts into her bag, her movements swift, deliberate. Marcus followed, his eyes glinting with pride. "Ready for the next step?" he asked. Lena's lips curled, a predator's smile. "I was born for this." As they stepped into the Brooklyn night, the city's pulse roared in her ears, a call to war. Ethan and Olivia thought they could bury the truth, but Lena was digging it up, and it would hit like a tsunami. You killed him, Ethan. Lena Carter's voice sliced through the dim hum of Marcus Reed's Brooklyn apartment, her words a guillotine as she stared at the laptop screen, her fingers trembling with the weight of the truth. The grainy police photo of James Holt's wrecked car, brake lines severed, burned into her eyes, but it was the audio file she'd just played that stopped her heart. James Holt's voice, crackling through time, accused Ethan of siphoning millions from the Unity Fund and threatened to expose him. The next sound was Ethan's cold reply. You'll regret this, James. Lena's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until they ached, her pulse a war drum pounding in her chest. This wasn't just theft, it was murder. Marcus leaned over, his eyes wide, his breath sharp. That's it, Lena. That's the smoking gun. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers gripping the USB drive like a grenade. The files she'd unearthed, emails, wire transfers, Olivia's signatures, painted a clear picture. Ethan hadn't just stolen $2 million from the Black Communities Fund, he'd orchestrated Holt's death to keep it buried. Olivia, his assistant, had signed off on the cover-up, her name on a shell company payment the day after the crash. Lena's stomach churned, bile rising, but her resolve was steel. Ethan's empire was a house of cards, and she held the win. She replayed the audio, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from a fury so raw it felt like her veins might burst. Holt's voice, steady, desperate, detailed Ethan's scam, fake invoices, offshore accounts, a charity gutted for profit. Then Ethan's threat, chilling, deliberate. Handle it, he'd said to an unknown accomplice. Lena's eyes flicked to Marcus, her voice a hiss. Olivia was in on it. She's no pawn. Marcus nodded, his fist clenching. She's guarding his secrets, probably her own too. Lena's nails dug into her palms, the sting anchoring her. She'd been Ethan's wife, his shield, while he and Olivia bled communities dry. Her laptop pinged, a new email from Marcus's precinct contact, a scanned deposition from a mechanic, buried in the 2010 case file, confirmed the brake lines were cut deliberately. Lena's breath hitched, her heart slamming against her ribs. The mechanic had been paid off, his signature on a non-disclosure agreement tied to Ethan's company. Every piece fit, Holt's death, the missing millions, Olivia's threats. Lena stood, her hoodie slipping, her posture rigid with purpose. We've got him, she said, her voice ablade. Both of them. Marcus clapped her shoulder, his eyes glinting. Time to take this public. Lena's mind raced, mapping the next move. The evidence was ironclad, but exposing Ethan meant facing Olivia's claws and Ethan's power. Her fingers brushed the USB drive, its weight a promise of justice. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. Aisha's community center, Holt's silenced voice, countless others Ethan had crushed. They all fueled her. Her lips curled, a predator's smile. Ethan had called her nothing, but she'd make him choke on that lie. As she stuffed the drive into her bag, the city's pulse outside thrummed, a call to battle. The truth was her weapon, and it was loaded, ready to fire. You're done, Lena. Back off or you're dead. Olivia's voice was a venomous hiss, her heels clicking like gunfire on the polished floor of Ethan Caldwell's sleek Manhattan office. Lena Carter stood her ground, her fists clenched, her pulse hammering like a jackhammer. The USB drive in her pocket, loaded with proof of Ethan's theft and James Holt's murder, burned against her thigh, a ticking bomb. Olivia's blonde hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes cold, predatory, as she stepped closer, her smirk a blade aimed at Lena's heart. Lena's jaw tightened, her teeth grinding until they stung. She wasn't the broken wife Ethan had scorned. She was a warrior, and Olivia was about to learn that. You covered up a murder, Lena shot back, her voice a razor, slicing through the tense air. Olivia laughed, sharp and cruel, cutting her off. You're a nobody with a grudge. You think you can touch us? She leaned in, her breath hot, her words dripping with disdain. Ethan's untouchable, and I'm his shield. Lena's nails dug into her palms, the pain anchoring her fury. She stepped forward, closing the gap, her eyes locked on Olivia's. You're his lapdog, Olivia, And I've got the proof to bury you both. Her hand twitched toward the USB, but Olivia's hand shot out, grabbing Lena's wrist, her grip like a vice. Lena yanked free, her heart pounding, her breath sharp. "Touch me again, and you'll regret it," she hissed, her voice low, lethal. Olivia smirked, unfazed, and snapped her fingers. The office door swung open, and a hulking figure in a black suit stepped in, his eyes dead, his fists clenched. Lena's pulse spiked, her muscles tensing, but she didn't flinch. "You hired muscle?" she said, her voice mocking, her lips curling. "Scared of a nobody?" Olivia's smirk faltered, her eyes flashing with rage. "Take her out," she barked at the thug, her voice a whip. The man lunged, his fist swinging, but Lena ducked, her reflexes sharp, her body moving like a coiled spring. She grabbed a paperweight from the desk, hurling it at the thug's head. It connected with a crack, sending him staggering. Lena bolted for the door, her sneakers squeaking, her heart slamming against her ribs. Olivia screamed, "Stop her!" But Lena was already in the hallway, the USB drive still in her pocket, her mind racing. She sprinted toward the stairwell, her breath ragged, her legs burning. Footsteps thundered behind her, the thug's bulk closing in. She shoved open the stairwell door, nearly tripping as she took the steps two at a time, her hands gripping the railing, her pulse a deafening roar. At the ground floor, she burst into an alley behind the building, the Manhattan night swallowing her. The thug was close, his shadow looming. Lena darted behind a dumpster, her chest heaving, her fingers clutching the USB like a lifeline. The thug slowed, his breathing heavy, his eyes scanning the dark. Lena's teeth bit her lip, the sting grounding her. She wasn't running from fear. She was buying time. Marcus was waiting, ready to leak the evidence to the press, but she needed to escape this alive. Her eyes darted to a fire escape ladder, her body tensing for the next move. Olivia's voice echoed from the alley's mouth, cold and commanding. "You can't hide, Lena. You're nothing." Lena's lips curled, a predator's smile. Nothing? She'd show them. She slipped the USB deeper into her pocket, her resolve ironclad. The thug's footsteps grew closer, his shadow stretching across the alley wall. Lena's heart pounded, but her mind was clear, her body primed. She'd face this danger head on, and when she did, Ethan and Olivia would learn what a nobody could do. The city's pulse thrummed around her, a call to fight, and Lena was ready to answer. "You can't outrun the truth, Ethan." Lena Carter's voice was a low growl, her breath ragged as she crouched in the shadows of a Brooklyn warehouse, her fingers clutching the USB drive that held Ethan Caldwell's sins, proof of his theft and James Holt's murder. Her heart pounded like a sledgehammer, her pulse still racing from the chase through the alley where Olivia's thug had nearly caught her. Her hoodie was torn, her knuckles scraped raw from scaling the fire escape, but her eyes burned with a fire no one could extinguish. Olivia's threat, "You're dead," echoed, but Lena wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. Marcus Reed's text buzzed her phone. "Meet me at Holt's old office. Found something." Lena's lips curled, a predator's smile, as she slipped through the warehouse's rusted door, her sneakers silent on the concrete. The air was thick with dust, but she moved like a blade, her senses sharp. Holt's office, abandoned since his 2010 crash, was a long shot, but Marcus's source had tipped them off. A hidden safe, untouched for years. Lena's fingers tightened around the USB, its weight a vow. She'd escaped Olivia's trap, but she needed the final nail to bury Ethan's empire. The warehouse loomed dark, broken windows casting jagged shadows. Lena's breath hitched as she spotted Marcus's silhouette near a back room, his flashlight slicing through the gloom. "Over here!" he hissed, his voice urgent. Lena darted forward, her pulse spiking as she saw the safe, rusted, half hidden behind a stack of crates. Marcus knelt, his crowbar prying at the lock, his gray hair catching the faint light. "Holt kept backups," he said, his voice low. "If Ethan hid anything, it's here." Lena nodded, her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until they stung. Every second felt like a countdown, Olivia's thug still out there hunting her. Marcus popped the safe, the hinges screeching like a warning. Inside, a dusty laptop and a stack of papers, bank statements, contracts, a handwritten note from Holt. Lena's hands trembled as she grabbed the laptop, her fingers flying to boot it up. The screen flickered, revealing a folder labeled Caldwell Evidence. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her breath shallow. She clicked, and a video loaded. Grainy security footage from 2010, showing a mechanic tampering with Holt's car. Ethan's voice in the background. Make it look like an accident. Lena's stomach churned, bile rising, but her resolve was iron. Got him, she whispered, her voice a blade. Marcus rifled through the papers, his eyes widening. Look at this. He handed her a contract, signed by Ethan and Olivia, funneling Unity Fund money to a shell company the day after Holt's death. Lena's nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her fury. They both planned it, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Marcus nodded, his fist clenching. This ties them to the murder. We leaked this. They're done. Lena copied the video to her USB, her movements swift, deliberate. Her eyes flicked to the warehouse door, her senses on edge. Olivia's thug could be close, and time was slipping. Her phone buzzed again. An email from Marcus's precinct contact. Mechanic's alive. Willing to talk. Lena's pulse spiked, her lips pressing into a thin line. The mechanic who'd tampered with Holt's brakes was the final piece. She texted back, arranging a meet at a diner across town. Marcus stuffed the papers into his bag, his voice firm. We move now. The press is ready. Lena nodded, her hoodie slipping, her posture rigid with purpose. She wasn't just surviving. She was dismantling Ethan's world, piece by bloody piece. As they slipped out of the warehouse, the Brooklyn night pressed in, the city's pulse a war drum in Lena's ears. She clutched the USB and papers, her knuckles white, her heart pounding with a vow. Ethan and Olivia thought they could silence her, but she was a storm, and her evidence was lightning. The diner meet was set, the press was waiting, and Lena was ready to strike. As she and Marcus vanished into the shadows, the truth in her hands burned brighter than ever, a beacon that would torch Ethan's lies to ash. Your empire's built on blood, Ethan. Lena Carter's voice cut like a shard of glass through the glittering chaos of the Manhattan Tech Conference, her eyes locked on Ethan Caldwell as she stood at the back of the packed auditorium. The USB drive in her pocket, loaded with the video of James Holt's murder and the Unity Fund's stolen millions, felt like a loaded gun. Her heart pounded, a war drum, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. Ethan, on stage in his tailored suit, froze mid-speech, his smile cracking as Lena stepped forward. Her hoodie swapped for a sharp blazer, her posture a blade forged in fury. The crowd, investors, tech moguls, reporters, turned, murmurs rippling like a storm. Lena raised her phone, connected to the auditorium's projector, her fingers steady despite the fire in her veins. Play it, she said, her voice a whip, signaling Marcus Reed in the control booth. The screen behind Ethan flickered, and James Holt's voice boomed, Stop the transfers, or I go public. Then Ethan's cold reply, Make it look like an accident. Gasps erupted, the crowd's eyes darting to Ethan. His face paled, his hands gripping the podium, knuckles white. Lena's lips curled, a predator's smile. She'd escaped Olivia's thug, found the evidence, and now she'd gut him in front of his world. Olivia, seated in the front row, bolted upright, her blonde hair whipping as she shouted, She's lying! Her voice was shrill, desperate, but Lena cut her off, her hands slashing the air. You signed the cover-up, Olivia. Your name's on the contract. She held up the printed document from Holt's safe, her voice a blade. You helped kill him. The crowd's murmurs turned to a roar, phones flashing as reporters scrambled to record. Ethan's eyes darted to Olivia, panic flashing, but she lunged for the stage, her heels clicking like gunfire. Shut it off, she screamed at the tech crew, but Marcus had locked the booth. The video looped, showing the mechanic tampering with Holt's brakes, Ethan's voice damning him. Lena stepped closer, her eyes locked on Ethan's, her voice low, lethal. You stole millions from the black community. You murdered to hide it. The crowd was in chaos now, investors standing, reporters shouting questions. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came, his empire crumbling under the weight of his lies. Olivia grabbed his arm, her face twisted. "Fix this, Ethan," she hissed, but he shoved her away, his hands shaking, his control gone. Lena stood tall, her blazer sharp, her gaze unyielding. She wasn't the wife he'd scorned at his birthday bash. She was a force wielding truth like a sword. The crowd parted as security moved in, but Marcus signaled from the booth. Cops were on their way. Olivia tried to bolt, her heels slipping, but a reporter blocked her, camera flashing. Ethan sank onto the podium, his face a mask of defeat, his eyes meeting Lena's one last time. She didn't flinch. Her silence said it all. She'd won. As the auditorium erupted, Lena turned, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, her heart light with justice. The USB drive was empty now, its truth unleashed. Ethan and Olivia were exposed, their lies ash in her wake. She walked out, the city's pulse thumping in her ears, a victory song. The fight wasn't over. Cops, trials, headlines awaited, but Lena had struck the fatal blow, and nothing could take that from her. "You're finished, Ethan." Lena Carter's voice was a steel blade, cutting through the sterile air of the Manhattan law office as she faced Ethan Caldwell across a polished oak table. Her eyes, sharp as flint, locked onto his, unyielding as she slid divorce papers toward him. Her blazer hugged her frame, a stark contrast to the broken wife he'd scorned months ago. Her heart thumped, steady, not with rage but with triumph. The conference video, James Holt's murder, the stolen millions, had torched Ethan's empire, and now the cops had him in cuffs. Olivia, his accomplice, was already booked, her smug mask shattered. Lena's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding, but her lips curled into a victor's smile. Ethan slumped, his suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, hollow. "Lena, he started, but she sliced him off, her hand slashing the air. "Sign." Her voice was a whip, no room for his excuses. His hands shook, the pen scratching the paper like a confession carved in stone. Lena stood taller, her posture ironclad, her pulse steady. The room was silent, the lawyer's pen frozen, as Ethan's signature sealed his fall. His company was in ruins. Investors fled, headlines screaming, "Tech mogul's murder scandal." Olivia faced charges for conspiracy, her name tied to the shell company that hid the blood money. Lena's evidence had been the guillotine, and she'd swung it. She grabbed the signed papers, her fingers steady, her breath even. "You thought I was nothing," she said, her voice low, lethal. "Now you're nothing." Ethan's head dropped, his hands trembling. No trace of the billionaire who'd wished her gone. Lena turned, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, her heart light with justice. The lawyer cleared her throat, but Lena didn't pause. She'd torn down their lies, and the weight of a decade's pain lifted with each step. Outside, the Manhattan air hit her, sharp and clean, the city's pulse of victory march. Ethan and Olivia were ashes now, and Lena was the fire that burned them. Her fight wasn't over. Trials loomed, but justice had struck, and she'd wielded the blade. "I destroyed you, Ethan, but I'm building something bigger." Lena Carter's voice was a steel arrow, piercing the air as she stood in her new Brooklyn office, her eyes blazing with purpose, her blazer sharp against her frame. Ethan Caldwell's televised apology played muted on a corner TV, his haggard face confessing to the Unity Fund theft and James Holt's murder. His empire was ash, his name a punchline. But Lena's gaze didn't linger. Her fingers gripped a stack of grant applications, her pulse steady, her jaw clenched with a resolve forged in fire. She'd toppled him in court, but this, her new nonprofit, Truth Rising, was her true victory, a beacon for those he'd crushed. Ethan's voice crackled through the TV, weak, broken. "I'm funding a new community trust to make amends." Lena's lips curled, a bitter smirk. His $10 million pledge to Black communities was a desperate grab for redemption, but it meant nothing to her. She'd signed the divorce papers, taken half his assets, and walked away, her heart unburdened by his pleas. Her nails dug into her palms, the sting grounding her. She wasn't here to watch him grovel. She was here to rebuild what he'd stolen: hope, trust, futures. Her office buzzed with volunteers, their voices a hum of purpose, sorting files for her first project, restoring Aisha's community center. Marcus Reed burst in, his gray hair wild, his eyes glinting. "You see Ethan's stunt?" he asked, tossing a tablet onto her desk, showing headlines of Ethan's pledge. Lena's teeth ground together, her voice a blade. "He's buying forgiveness. Too late." She shoved the tablet aside, her hands moving to a laptop, pulling up her nonprofit's mission, exposing corruption, amplifying silenced voices. Marcus clapped her shoulder, his voice firm. "You're doing more than he ever will." Lena nodded, her posture rigid, her heart thumping with a vow. Ethan's money was a bandage, her work was a revolution. She strode to a whiteboard, her marker slashing out plans, workshops, investigations, scholarships for young journalists. Her volunteers watched, their eyes wide, inspired. Isha, the young woman from the community center, stepped forward, clutching a folder. "We're funded again, Lena, because of you." Lena's chest tightened, not with pain, but with pride. She'd fought for Aisha, for James Holt, for every name Ethan's greed had erased. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a fire that burned brighter than ever. "This is just the start," she said, her voice low, fierce. Aisha's smile was a spark, igniting Lena's resolve. Her phone buzzed, an email from a reporter requesting an interview about Truth Rising. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes scanning the room. Papers, laptops, indeterminate faces surrounded her, a fortress of truth. She typed a reply, her fingers swift, accepting the interview. Ethan's apology was noise. Her work was thunder. She'd built this from the ashes of his betrayal, and it was stronger than his empire ever was. Marcus handed her a coffee, his grin sharp. "You're unstoppable, Lena." She took the cup, her grip firm, her heart light with purpose. As she turned to the window, the Brooklyn skyline stretched before her, a canvas of possibility. Ethan's pledge was a footnote, his guilt irrelevant. Lena's nonprofit was her legacy, a blade to cut through lies like his. Her volunteers moved around her, their energy a pulse matching her own. She wasn't just rebuilding, she was rewriting the story, giving voice to the voiceless. The city hummed outside, a call to keep fighting, and Lena was ready, her resolve a flame that would never die. "The truth is my power, and it's rewriting history." Lena Carter's voice rang out, sharp as a blade, as she stood at the podium in her Brooklyn nonprofit's packed community hall, her eyes blazing with unyielding resolve. The crowd, local activists, journalists, and families like Aisha's, hung on her every word, their faces lit with hope. Lena's blazer hugged her frame, her posture a steel pillar, her pulse steady, thrumming with triumph. Ethan Caldwell's empire was ash, his televised confession a fading echo, but Lena's Truth Rising was a beacon, illuminating the stories he'd buried. Her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding with the weight of her journey, but her lips curled into a warrior's smile, forged from the fire of his betrayal. She gestured to the wall behind her, where a digital screen displayed James Holt's face, his name restored from Ethan's lies. "This is for him," Lena said, her voice a whip, cutting through the air. For every voice silenced by greed. The crowd roared, their applause a thunderclap, but Lena's heart pounded for Aisha, who stood in the front row, clutching a restored deed to her community center. Lena's fingers tightened around the podium, her knuckles white, her resolve ironclad. She'd fought for this. Through Ethan's scorn, Olivia's threats, the alley chase, the warehouse evidence, and now she stood victorious, not just over him, but for those he'd crushed. Marcus Reed leaned against a wall, his gray hair catching the light, his grin sharp as he nodded. "You did it, Lena," he mouthed, his eyes glinting with pride. Lena's chest tightened, not with pain, but with a fierce joy. She'd built Truth Rising from the ashes of her marriage, turning her pain into purpose. Her volunteers bustled around the hall, handing out flyers, their energy a pulse matching her own. A young journalist, Maya, approached, her notebook open, her voice eager. "Miss Carter, Can you help trace my family's history? They lost everything in '08. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line, her heart thumping. We'll find it, she said, her voice low, fierce. No story stays buried. She stepped off the podium, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, her hands steady as she took Maya's notebook. Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing on faces she'd empowered. Families reunited with their pasts, communities funded again. Ethan's $10 million pledge was a footnote. Lena's work was a revolution. Her phone buzzed. A news alert about Ethan's trial, his assets frozen, Olivia's plea deal collapsing. Lena swiped it away, her fingers swift, her focus unshaken. Ethan was a ghost. His apologies dust. She'd moved beyond him, her life no longer tethered to his lies. Lena strode to a table piled with files, her hands sorting through grant proposals, her mind racing with plans, exposing more corruption, training new journalists, rebuilding what greed had torn down. Aisha joined her smile wide, her voice soft. You gave us back our home, Lena. Lena's throat tightened, her nails digging into her palms, the sting grounding her. You deserve it, she said, her voice a blade of sincerity. The hall hummed with purpose, every voice a thread in the tapestry she'd woven. She wasn't just a journalist anymore. She was a keeper of truths, a warrior for the forgotten. As the event wound down, Lena slipped outside, the Brooklyn night wrapping her in its embrace. She climbed to the rooftop, her sneakers crunching on gravel, her blazer catching the city's glow. The skyline stretched before her, a canvas of possibility, its pulse syncing with her own. She pulled a photo from her pocket, her and Ethan years ago, smiling, naive. Her fingers tore it in half, the pieces fluttering into the dark. You thought I was nothing, she whispered, her voice a vow. I'm everything. The city roared below, a symphony of resilience, and Lena stood tall, her heart light, her future blazing. She thought of James Holt, Aisha, Maya, the lives she'd touched, the stories she'd restored. Truth Rising wasn't just a nonprofit, it was her legacy, a fortress built from the rubble of Ethan's betrayal. Her volunteers' laughter drifted up from the hall, a reminder of the family she'd found. Marcus joined her, his voice low. You changed the game, Lena. She nodded, her eyes locked on the horizon, her resolve a flame that would never die. The lesson was clear. Truth could shatter empires and rebuild worlds. As the city's lights winked like allies, Lena knew she'd only begun. Her fight was eternal, and she'd never stop. Lena Carter's journey proves that truth is a weapon, shattering lies and rebuilding hope from betrayal's ashes. Her fight against Ethan's empire shows that resilience and justice can rise from even the deepest wounds. What did Lena's story spark in you? Did her fire inspire, or did Ethan's fall stir debate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own stories of standing up or overcoming. We're grateful for every moment you've spent with us, and your voice fuels these tales. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more stories of triumph and truth. See you next time.